In this video we're going to show you how you can use DHCP on our NVRs and DVRs, which is a protocol that automatically gets an IP address from your router. This will help you figure out what your network scheme is so that you can set the NVR or DVR to a static IP address to communicate on your network. And also help you set up your cameras because you'll know which IP addresses you should set your cameras to. So in order to figure this out, we're first going to right click on main menu. This brings up our graphical password. We're going to go ahead and log in here. This password usually is found on the top of your recorder. And then down here at the bottom we see the settings section of the main menu. We're going to click on network. This brings us to our network port settings. Now keep in mind all NVRs ship with the default address of 192.168.1.108. All cameras will also ship with the same default IP address of 192.168.1.108. And here we know that this is actually plugged into a router, that this subnet or IP address will not work on this router. So we want to figure out what IP address will work on the router. So in order to figure this out, we're going to click on the edit button. Here we can see that there is DHCP, so we're going to check that. And now it's set everything to 00 because it has not gotten an address from the router yet, so we're going to click OK. Then we're going to click Apply to save our changes. Then we're going to click OK to get out of this menu. Now in order to get an IP address from a router, we have to restart our NVR. This process can be different on your NVR or DVR. Sometimes it does get the IP address right after you turn on DHCP. Other NVRs and recorders will require you to restart. So we're going to click Shutdown and then restart our NVR. And we'll be back with you after the NVR has restarted. Alright, so our NVR has restarted. Now we can go ahead and check and see what our IP address is that we received from the router. So in order to do that, we're going to go back into the main menu. Just like before, we're going to use the graphical password to log in. And now we're going to go back under Setting to Network. And now we can see that the DHCP from this router has set us up with an IP address of 10.1.2.100. Now we're going to go ahead and verify that we can use this IP address. And here we can see that it is set to DHCP, and this is the address that we got from the router. So now we know that this router is communicating with this IP address scheme. So now you're always going to want to make sure you set your recorder back to a static IP address. Now this could be any number between 2 and 254. Because you don't want it to be the same as your gateway. So it can't be 1. We know it can't be 1. And then when you set it to DHCP, you are going to get the default gateway from the router. It will automatically send this information over, which is the IP address of the router, which helps the NVR communicate on the network. The center is the subnet mask, which will also be auto-populated by the router when you receive this IP address from the router. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go ahead and set this to a static IP address from 100 to 80. And then we can start adding our cameras at 10.1.2.81 and so forth. Now down here we see that the DNS has stuck from the old information that we had set on this. So in order to alleviate that, we can either set it to DHCP if we were to have this on DHCP, and it would automatically pull this information from the router, or we can set it to the DNS from Google, which is Google's public DNS. And that is actually set for our alternate DNS here. But we want to make sure we set it ourselves, so we're going to set it to 8.8.8.8, and then the alternate is 8.8.4.4. So we can click Apply and click OK. Now that we've set our NVR up on our network, all we have to do is make sure we keep this IP address scheme in mind, and we set up all of our IP cameras to work with this IP address. And that's covered in another video, and you can certainly use the camera registration screen to modify the IP address and initialize the cameras. And again, that's covered in another video. Hopefully this video helped you figure out what your network scheme is. Continue reading our guide to figure out how to set up the rest of your system, and then also utilize this IP address scheme that you have figured out. Thank you for watching.